Welcome to Healing the Trauma Within. In this session, I am speaking with Katie Sutherland on healing after birth trauma. But let me tell you a little bit about Katie before we get started. Katie Sutherland is an energy medicine healer, teacher, and holistic wellness practitioner who supports mothers to thrive and reclaim their empowerment and vibrancy while navigating the journey of motherhood and childbirth. For the past 2 decades, Katie has been collecting and cultivating a wide range of tools and wisdom to support others on the path home to their inherent wholeness, well-being, and freedom. Katie's diverse background includes thousands of hours of training in various bodywork and energy modalities, Arvigo techniques of Maya abdominal therapy, holistic pelvic care, trauma resolution, advanced craniosacral therapy, 7 years as a yoga teacher, as well as being a certified integrative health coach. Welcome, Katie. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
As I stumble over my tongue there.
Some of those are a mouthful.
I know. I'm trying to read them without stumbling can be difficult, but I'm glad to have you here. You know, birth trauma is not something that we talk about a lot. And I think it's very important because, you know, those of us who are moms and who have been through it, you know, we need somebody to talk to. But, you know, let's kind of define birth trauma for those who don't really know what we're talking about.
Sure. Well, I like to use a pretty broad definition of the word trauma, which is any experience that you have that is too fast, too much, or too soon for your system, your body, your mind to kind of catch up with it. That then gets locked in sort of a negative feedback loop in your system. And so oftentimes when women are giving birth, they go into an expanded state, sort of an altered brain state, and then things happen in the medical system that don't feel very honoring or can feel very violating by what the way that they're treated in the medical setting. And then there's just the actual, you know, sometimes birth is an actual physical, traumatic, medical life and death experience. So it's sort of a broad term. I sometimes like to say difficult birth experiences, because sometimes even when people have had a pretty straightforward, even at home birth, they can still have layers of trauma that get stuck in their system from something that was too much, too fast, too soon for their system to catch up.
You know, thinking back to the 4 births that I've had, and 2 of them were pretty straightforward and easy, while 2 of them were not so easy.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when I think about giving birth to my babies, I always think about the 2 that were not easy.
Yeah.
You know, the first one where I wasn't progressing fast enough. And so by the time I was finally at a point they could give me an epidural, I was too far dilated. So I ended up having a natural childbirth that I was not prepared for.
Right.
Yeah. You know, and then my last one, she was my smallest baby, but she was my toughest to deliver. You know, so those, I guess, are levels of trauma that I never really thought of before.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, especially when you think back to, you know, 4 kids, and those are the only 2 that I talk about as far as their births go.
Right.
You know, the other one is more of a funny story. Is we were watching Jeopardy in between contractions. You know, not very traumatic. That was a nice, easygoing birth. But, you know, so for those that have had the difficult births, how do they recognize and realize that they may be harboring some trauma from that?
Sure. I think a good way to think about it, like even what you're speaking to right now, is like, are you sort of haunted by what occurred during the birth? Are you having nightmares? Do you have a sense that you have shifted from being a more just relaxed and calm person to being a lot more anxious and hyper vigilant, which is like being on alert all the time.
Hmm.
Some of that can come with just being a new mom, but a lot of times, if you've had a triggering traumatic birth experience, it can get really locked in and be heightened. Um, there's there's also the flip side of, I've encountered a lot of people who were traumatized by their birth, and they're like, oh, I never want to think about it again. I never want to talk about it. I never want to face it. I don't want to look at it. It's too overwhelming.
Hmm.
So um, I think that's some of the clues that you're going to have about whether, do you feel like when you tell the story, it feels empowering, or is there like a lot of like heaviness or sadness up? Do you get really angry about the experience? Those are all indicators that you probably have some stuff to work on and work through with the birth experience that you had.
Those are some great ideas, or some not ideas, but some great things to look for. Um, I mean, I'm at the point now, my oldest is almost 30 and my youngest is 16. So I tell the stories and I don't have any real emotion attached to them at this point. But
Right.
there are those that carry that emotion with them throughout throughout their life.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
And particularly if you've generally been fortunate to be healthy through most of your life, maybe this is your first experience going into the medical setting, or possibly you've had a traumatic experience before and that gets stirred up in the birth experience. So, um, for a lot of women, they think birth is going to be a lot different than it actually is. And it it definitely can stir up uncomfortable feelings. I like to talk about it as more of an underworld journey and the heroine's journey, rather than like oh, tiptoe through the tulips. Like I think there's like a natural birth sort of fantasy that's out there in the world that you just like calmly meditate and, you know drop drop inside and the baby comes out. And
and there are those lucky ones out there, but they are few and
sure.
far between.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that there's like a lot to be said for those experiences, and those should be celebrated. But I think for those of us who were hoping to have a natural birth, once you're in it, it's like you realize just how difficult and challenging and unprepared you actually are for it. So,
Yeah.
and there's a mystery to it also. Like, you don't know what's going to arise. You don't
Right.
know what's going to happen. You don't know what's being held in your body. You're uncertain with what's happening with the baby. So all sorts of twists and turns can arise, and so yeah.
And I think too, giving birth, if you are somebody maybe who has experienced sexual assault or molestation in your life, giving birth just in itself, the thought of it can be highly traumatic, because
Yes.
you got to have people down there in places we don't want people.
Yeah,
Um,
and there's a wonderful book called When Survivors Give Birth, and it's all about that exact topic. It was written by Penny Simkin, and it is uh, really helps put the power back into the birthing survivor's hands, so that you know I myself am a early childhood trauma. And I really learned to communicate with my gynecologist, just even in regular exams, to say, like, you need to like look me in the eye before you do something. You need to like slow down and make sure I'm ready for what you're going to do. And so those are ways of negotiating that having people down there in your pelvic area where you may still be holding trauma,
Mhm.
and be able to negotiate that in a way that you can stay present and stay resourced, so you're not adding to the trauma um, in the birth experience. But a lot of women I've found didn't anticipate that coming up for them in their birth experience, and
Mhm.
then it's like they have a coupled trauma, face layers of their sexual assault history or molestation history, coupled with then what occurred in the birth experience. As I
Right.
know the work you do, it's all released, and the way I see that is just it's another opportunity for healing and finding more and sovereignty in your body. So, you know, it's not fun or pleasant, but there are definitely resources out there to address those layers as well.
Yeah, and I think communication is with your team is definitely key, and making
Yeah.
sure that you find trauma informed doctors and nurses and midwives, whoever doulas, make sure that
Yeah,
they're
and
trauma informed. And
you can interview them in advance. And if you feel like they can't hold that space or don't really know about it or brush you off, not a
Mhm.
match for you.
Right, because there's some clinics where you get whatever doctor's on call, and that
Right.
doctor may not
Right.
be caught up on your case and your needs and all of that. So definitely interview
Right.
before. So what are
Yeah.
some
And when you get to the hospital, oh, sorry. I was just
no,
going to
go
say
ahead.
that's why having a doula or,
Yeah.
yeah, having a doula or, your whoever is with you when you're birthing, it can be very hard to communicate that as the birthing person. But whoever's with you, either your partner or a doula, can communicate that right away to the medical team that they take that extra step to make sure that, you know, they're informed that you have a history of trauma, and how can they communicate with you in a more slow and intentional way, um,
Mhm.
to be able to navigate that.
Right. And this could be from a previous birth trauma too, not just sexual trauma.
Sure. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Or, people have gynecological trauma.
Mhm.
Um, Women's pelvic floors and pelvic bowls, it's a bowl. It holds a lot. So it holds our history, it holds our emotions. There's so many nerve endings down there that, like, they're showing now more kind of like the gut holds so much emotional
Mhm.
information. It's like the pelvic floor is responsive that way as well. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah.
What
And
is
you might not even know that there is trauma in there until you're
true?
in the situation.
That's true. That is very true. What are some ways that, they can start to overcome those birth traumas?
Sure, yeah. There's wonderful one-on-one therapies that you can do with licensed mental health providers. I really like EMDR. It's a very body-based, uh, guided therapy that's shown to be very effective for helping trauma move out of your system. Um, I lead a circle, and there's many different people that lead practices. The circle I lead is just it's learning about how trauma works in your system, and then also doing some ceremony and guided meditation that helps to, on the subconscious level, address the trauma so that you're free from those experiences. certainly like the first steps that are great is just journal about it. Just
Mhm.
free write, get it out on the page. Don't edit it. Don't read it. Just get it out. That can really start to free
Oh,
the situation.
yeah.
Um, I think seeking support, if you have a compassionate other mother, that non-judgmental space to you and hear your story. I think just having the story witnessed in that way without them trying to fix anything or change anything, just being witnessed is a really wonderful way for these stories to start to lose their grip on you.
Right. Well, that's great. Thank you so much for coming on and talking with us a little bit about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I said, it's not a topic that we talk about a lot that needs to be more brought to more awareness. So
Yes. Yes.
absolutely.
That's my hope is that we talk about it more and we educate mothers before even giving birth so that
Mhm.
there's less and less need for the work after.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank
Well,
you
thank
so
you.
much. It was
Thank you.
wonderful talking with you.
And listeners, thank you for joining in on this session, and we will talk to you in one of the other sessions. Thank you.
Thank you.